Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a story from Sweden, and the title of this story is The Three Dogs. There was once upon a time a king who had traveled in many lands, and on one of his journeys he met a fair lady whom he married and brought home with him. And before long a little daughter was born to them, and there was great rejoicing, for they were both much loved by the people of their land. But on the very day that the child was born, a queer old dame appeared at the palace and asked to see the king. And when she came into his presence, she warned him never to let the child go out of doors until she was 15 years old, for if she did, the giants of the mountain would carry her off. The king took heed of the words of the old dame and gave orders that the child was to be kept indoors. Before long a second daughter was born, and again the old dame came and gave the same warning. Then there came a third daughter, and everything happened as it had done before. The king and queen were much troubled about this matter, but they gave strict orders that the three princesses were to be kept within the palace, and they waited with what patience they could muster until they should be old enough to go out. The three girls grew up to be very beautiful, but when the eldest was within a month of her 15th birthday, the king had to go away to war. While he was gone, the three princesses were sitting at their window one spring morning, looking out at the flowers in the garden, where the sun was shining brightly. They wanted so much to go out that at last they ran downstairs to the little doorway which opened into the garden. At every door a guard was always stationed, with instructions on no account to let the princesses out. But they coaxed and pleaded until the man at this door, who did not know the reason for his orders, let them out into the garden. For a short time they played happily among the flowers, but soon a cloud of mist came down and wrapped itself about them, then rose into the air, bearing them with it. Messengers were sent out north, south, east, and west, but they could hear nothing of the three princesses. When the king came home from the war, he had to be told of the dreadful thing that had happened, and sorrowful indeed were he and his queen, alone in their great palace without their lovely daughters. The king made it known throughout the land that anyone who brought back the princesses should have one of them for his wife, and half the kingdom for her dowry, whereupon many young men set off on the quest, among others, 2 young princes from neighboring countries to whose ears the story had come. They started off well armed, on fine horses, for they were rich and powerful. But they were rather foolish and very conceited, and set off boasting that they would soon return with the princesses and claim their reward. In the same country, but a long way from the chief town, there lived, in a little cottage in a wood, a poor woman with her son. The son spent his time looking after 3 pigs, which were all they possessed. He was a good lad, brave too, and strong. While he wandered about the forest with the pigs, he used to play sweet airs on a little wooden flute which he had made for himself. One day, as he sat playing his pipe in the wood, there came along an old man with a fine, big dog. The boy thought that he would love to have such a dog for company and protection. The old man seemed to be able to read his thoughts, for he offered to give him the dog in return for one of the pigs. This the boy was more than willing to do, and the old man then told him that the dog's name was Holdfast, and that if his master told him to hold a thing fast, he would do so, even if it were a great giant. When the boy got home and told his mother what he had done, she was furious and started beating him with a stick, and would not stop for all his pleading. So then he called his dog Holdfast, which at once rushed forward and held her fast, though without hurting her. So then she was obliged to give in. The next day the boy went again to the forest, and sat playing on his flute to the dog, which danced away to the tune in the most astonishing way. Soon the old man appeared again, accompanied by another dog, and again an exchange was made, for the boy thought it would be splendid to have 2 dogs to protect him. This one was called Tear, and the old man said that when told to do so, he would tear even the fiercest giant to bits. The lad's mother was very naturally greatly annoyed again, but she did not beat him this time. She was too much afraid of his two big dogs. The next day he went again into the woods as usual. Now he had only one pig left, but he had his two big dogs, which now danced together while he played on his flute. Yet once again the old man appeared, and the third and last pig was exchanged for a third dog. This one was called Sharp Ear, because his hearing was so quick that he could hear everything which was going on for miles and miles around. He could even hear the flowers growing, so quick were his ears, said the old man. So the boy went home quite contented with his three dogs, and though his mother was ill pleased, and no wonder, to find that all her pigs were gone, the boy assured her so earnestly that she should not be the loser of it, that he contrived somewhat to comfort her. The next day he went out early, hunting with his three dogs, and came home in the evening heavily laden with game. The day after he told his mother that he was off to seek his fortune, that he would be back ere long with all she could want to keep her in comfort. He traveled a long way, and in the depths of a great forest he met once more the old man for whom he had had the dogs. The old man asked him whither he was going, and when the boy told him he was going to seek his fortune, the old man told him to keep straight on until he came to a royal palace, and that there good fortune awaited him. So the boy kept cheerfully on his way, paying for food and lodging by playing on his flute and making his dogs dance. At last he came to a big town, and there he saw on the walls a proclamation about the three lost princesses, for in this city was the palace of the king, their father. Remembering what the old man had told him, the boy made his way to the palace where lived the sorrowful king and queen. When he showed the chamberlain how he could make his dogs dance, he was allowed to perform before their majesties in the hope that it might distract them. And the king was so much amused at the dancing dogs that he asked the boy what reward he would like. But the boy answered that all he asked was permission to go and seek the lost princesses. The king did not think that so young a lad would have any chance of success, but he would not forbid him to go, and promised that the reward offered should not be refused if he brought back the three maidens. So the boy set off with his three dogs, and very useful they were on the journey. Sharp Ear always told him what was happening for miles around. Holdfast carried his bundle, and he rode on Tear when he was tired, for Tear was the strongest of the three. One day Sharp Ear ran to him and told him that they were coming to a big mountain, and that he could hear one of the princesses spinning inside it. It belonged to a giant, said Sharp Ear, but the giant was not at home. When they came to the mountain, Sharp Ear said that he could hear the golden shoes of the giant's horse 10 miles away. The boy took his dogs to break open the door of the mountain, and there inside sat the lovely princess spinning golden thread. When she saw the boy, she was much surprised, for she had seen no human being for 7 years. She begged him to go away, for she knew that the giant would kill him when he returned. But the boy would not go. When the giant returned, he was furious to find the door broken open, and cried in a voice of thunder, "Who has dared to break open my door?" "I have," said the boy, "and now I will break you." Therefore he set his dogs upon the giant, and they tore him to bits. Then the boy took the giant's great horse, loaded it with a sack of his treasure, and, lifting the princess onto the saddle, went on his way. After they had traveled for a few days, Sharp Ear came running as before, and told the boy that they were again coming to a high mountain, and that he could hear a lady spinning inside. Again the giant was not at home, but this time he was but 8 miles away. Sharp Ear could hear the golden shoes of his horse. The dogs broke open the door of the mountain as before, and the second princess was rescued. When the giant arrived, the dogs made short work of him, as they had done of his brother, and the boy set the princess on the golden-shod horse beside her sister's steed, and they set off once more. You can imagine how delighted the princesses were to meet after so many years. They came after some days to a third mountain. This time the giant was but 5 miles off. Inside the mountain sat the third lovely princess weaving cloth of gold. But this time the giant did not shout and bluster when he arrived, for he had heard of the fate of his brothers. He put on a friendly manner and invited the boy to stay and eat. The boy was quite taken in and accepted the invitation, but the princess wept secretly, and the dogs seemed to be uneasy. When the meal was over, the youth asked if he could have a drink. "Up on the hillside is a spring of sparkling wine," said the giant, "but I have nobody to send to fetch some for us to drink." "That's all right," said the boy. "One of my dogs will soon fetch some." The giant was delighted, for he very much wanted to get rid of the dogs. Holdfast was given a jug and told to go for the wine, but he went unwillingly. After a time, as he did not come back, the giant suggested that another of the dogs should go to help him. The jug was a heavy one. This time Terror was sent, but he too went unwillingly and had to be driven off by his master. The princess wept, but the giant rejoiced to see that his plans were going so well. Some time went by. "I don't think much of your dogs," said the giant. "They are not very obedient. I expect they are chasing all over the mountain." The boy was vexed at this and told Sharp-Ear to go at once and bring back the other two and the wine. Sharp-Ear also went most unwillingly, but his master insisted. But when he got to the mountain top, a high wall immediately sprang up around him, which was what had also happened to the other two. This the giant had done by the power of his magic arts. And, now that the dogs were out of the way, the giant seized his sword from the wall and told the boy that his last moment had come. The youth was very frightened, but he kept his wits about him. "I have but one request to make," he said. "Before I die, I should like to say one prayer and play a hymn upon my flute." The giant gave his consent, but as soon as the boy began to play on his flute, the giant's magic became powerless, and the dogs, set free, came rushing down the mountain and tore the giant to pieces. This time the boy found a golden chariot belonging to the giant, and harnessing the horses to this, he started off to drive the princesses home. They did not know how to thank their brave deliverer enough. He was a handsome young fellow, and as he drove along, his black curls flew out in the wind, and each of the princesses fastened a gold ring from her finger into a lock of his hair. As they drew nearer to their home, they met two miserable-looking young men, and the youth stopped the chariot to inquire if he could help them. They turned out to be the two princes who had set out to seek for the princesses. They had been quite unsuccessful and were now in a sorry plight, having spent all their money and wasted all their strength. So the boy took them up in the chariot, being very sorry for them. But they were cruel and treacherous, for when they heard of the boy's adventures, they plotted to do away with him. The dogs were off hunting the woods around, and the princes were able to strangle the boy before he had time to call. They threatened to kill the princesses, too, unless they swore to keep silent, and they drove swiftly away, leaving the boy lying on the path. The princesses were most unhappy, especially the youngest, for she and the boy were in love with one another, and she had promised to marry him. But very soon the dogs came running up to seek their master, and when they found him, they licked his wounds and lay down beside him to keep him warm, so that before long he recovered and was able to go on his way. But when he came to the king's palace, he found it full of gay company, feasting and rejoicing. When he asked the cause of this, he learned that that very day the two eldest princesses were to be married to the two princes, who had, of course, told lying tales about their exploits. But the youngest princess, so he was told, would have nothing to do with the rejoicings, but sat apart and wept continually. Then the boy asked if he might entertain the company with his dancing dogs, and when he was shown into the great hall, all the guests were struck with his handsome looks and manly bearing. But the three princesses, as soon as they saw him, rushed towards him and fell into his arms. Seeing this, the two treacherous princes made a swift exit by the back door and were never heard of again. If there had been any doubt about the youth's identity, it would have been proven by the rings in his hair, but there was none to doubt his tale. And so he married the youngest princess, and in due time, I doubt not, husbands were found for the 2 others. But the brave lad received great honor, and when the king died, was chosen to reign in his stead. The old tale says nothing about his old mother or the dogs, but I think we can be pretty sure that his mother received every possible attention and comfort. As for the dogs, I'm certain they were petted and admired by the whole court, and that when the young king and queen had a family of children, which I'm sure they had, Holdfast, Tear, and Sharp-ear guarded them, and played with them so beautifully that the royal nurses had hardly anything at all to do.
Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.